Armand stepped out of the noisy wedding hall and took a slow breath, letting the cool evening air calm his mind. He had returned to his hometown after many years, only because his cousin insisted that he attend the wedding. The day had been loud, full of laughter, music, and colorful clothes. But despite all the celebration, Armand felt strangely alone. He had lived most of his adult life in another city, far from family, and coming back made him realize how much things had changed. People had grown older, children had become adults, and even the streets looked narrower than he remembered. Inside the hall, people were still dancing, but Armand had stepped out to get a moment to himself. He stood near the gate and watched guests walk in and out. That's when he first noticed her. She stood near the far corner of the garden area, taller than every person around her, almost impossible to miss. At first, Armand thought she might be a relative of the bride he didn't know. Her height was unlike anything he had seen in real life. She wasn't only tall, she had a strong, dignified presence, as if she carried herself with the confidence of someone who had learned to live with people's stares. She wore a simple traditional dress that seemed slightly short for her long frame. Her hair was tied back neatly, and her calm expression made her look gentle, despite her imposing size. Guests around her whispered softly, some glancing at her with curiosity, others with discomfort. A few children looked up at her with wide eyes, whispering to each other as if she were a character from a storybook. Adults, however, kept a certain distance, unsure of how to approach her. Armand didn't know why, but he felt drawn to her, not because of her height, but because of the quiet sadness in her eyes. She didn't seem to be enjoying the wedding. She stood alone, hands folded, watching everyone else. It looked as if she wasn't really a part of the celebration, but only present because she had been invited. He noticed her attempt to smile politely when people passed by, but the smile faded quickly each time. Armand recognized that kind of smile. It was the smile of someone who had spent their whole life living on the outside, watching others from a small emotional distance. After a few minutes, Armand went back into the hall, but he couldn't stop thinking about her. Even while eating or greeting relatives, his eyes drifted back to the garden. She remained in the same spot, almost like a quiet observer of a world that rarely welcomed her. Later, when the bride and groom arrived on stage for more photographs, the crowd moved around excitedly. Armand stood near a table, sipping juice, when he saw the tall woman enter the hall. Even inside, she stood far above everyone, and the crowd parted naturally, giving her space. Not because she asked for it, but because people felt unsure. She walked slowly, almost cautiously, as if careful not to disturb anyone. Her steps were soft, her posture straight, and her eyes focused on the floor more than on people. Armand felt a little sympathy for her. He wondered who she was. Was she a guest? A distant relative? Or someone who rarely attended events but had made an exception today? A sudden movement caught his attention. One of the little kids running around bumped into her accidentally. The child lost balance for a moment. But before he could fall, the tall woman bent and held his shoulder gently. "Are you okay?" she asked in a soft voice. The kid nodded and ran off again. Armand noticed that the woman let out a tiny breath afterward, as if relieved that the moment didn't turn into something awkward. He decided to approach her. Armand walked slowly, not wanting to startle her. When he reached near her, she looked up with surprise. Few people approached her willingly, and certainly not this gently. "Hi," Armand said with a polite smile. "I'm Armand. I think we haven't met before." She blinked, unsure for a moment, then returned a small smile. "Hello, I'm Samira." Her voice was deep yet soft, and there was a kindness in it that immediately put Armand at ease. "Are you related to the bride or groom?" he asked. "Not closely," she replied. "My mother was invited. She couldn't come, so I came instead." "Oh, I see," he said. "I'm here from out of town. Haven't been home in years." She nodded, polite but reserved. For a few seconds, there was silence, not uncomfortable, but quiet, like two strangers trying to understand each other. Armand noticed she held a small scarf in her hand. "That color looks nice," he said, trying to ease into a simple conversation. She looked down at it and gave a tiny, shy smile. "Thank you. It belonged to my mother." There was something gentle in her tone, something that made Armand feel she carried many memories silently. Suddenly, a group of relatives called Armand from across the hall. He excused himself with a brief smile. "It was nice meeting you, Samira." "Nice meeting you too," she said politely, though her expression suggested she hadn't had a nice meeting with many people before. Even though the exchange was short, Armand felt curious. She wasn't like others. There was something honest and unpretentious about her, simple, clear, and untouched by the need to impress. She felt real. As the evening continued, Armand got busy with family photos and conversations, but every time he glanced around, he found Samira again, always standing alone, always at a distance. She occasionally spoke to someone if they approached her first, but most avoided any long conversation. Near the end of the wedding, guests began preparing to leave. Samira waited patiently until most had gone before stepping outside. She picked up her small bag, wrapped her scarf around her shoulder, and headed toward the exit. Armand left the hall around the same time, and they ended up walking out together. "Leaving already?" he asked softly. "Yes," she replied. "Crowds make me uncomfortable sometimes." Armand nodded. "I understand. They can be overwhelming." She looked at him with gentle surprise. Most people never understood how she felt about crowds or attention. "I hope the evening wasn't too tiring for you," Armand added. "It was fine," Samira said. "Just loud." Armand noticed the small tiredness in her eyes. The kind of tiredness that doesn't come from walking or standing but from being watched, judged, or misunderstood. Before they parted ways, Samira's scarf slipped slightly from her shoulder. Armand reached out instinctively to catch it before it fell. "Oh, thank you," she said quietly. Armand handed it back with a smile. "No problem." She nodded, then walked toward the main road where her ride was waiting. Armand watched her leave, wondering why he felt such a strong urge to know her story. He didn't know her background, her struggles, her past, or her reasons for living so quietly. But something inside him whispered that Samira carried a world of untold stories behind her gentle eyes. As Armand walked toward his own car, he felt a strange sense of unfinished business, as if meeting her had opened a door that was meant to be opened. He didn't know it yet, but this single meeting would shape his days ahead in a way he never expected. He drove back to his guest house, thinking about the wedding, the noise, the relatives, and then, inevitably, about her. He wondered why she attended if crowds made her uncomfortable. Did she force herself to come out of respect? Did she prefer to stay home but didn't want to disappoint someone? Armand didn't have the answers, but the curiosity stayed with him like a small spark. Little did he know, fate was already arranging the next meeting between them. A scarf, a forgotten moment, and a small connection were quietly tying their lives together, preparing them for a story neither of them could have predicted. Armand woke up the next morning with a strange feeling, as if something from the previous night had stayed with him while he slept. He sat on the edge of the bed, rubbed his eyes, and realized he had been thinking about Samira even in his dreams. It wasn't love or attraction. It was something simpler and deeper, curiosity mixed with concern. He felt she carried a quiet sadness, and he couldn't ignore it. He remembered the small scarf she held at the wedding. The way she touched it gently made him think it was special to her. But when he checked his bag later, he found something surprising. Along with the things he placed inside last night, there was a scarf, her scarf. She must have dropped it when he caught it for her. And in all the rush of guests leaving, he must have folded it with his things without noticing. He unfolded it now. The scarf was soft, with delicate embroidery around the edges. It didn't look expensive, but it had a personal touch. Something made with love. He knew he couldn't leave town without returning it. He asked one of his relatives if they knew where Samira lived. Most had only seen her from afar, but an older aunt recognized her name and told him the village she came from. It wasn't too far, about an hour by car. Armand hesitated for a moment. Would it look strange if he showed up unannounced? But then he imagined her searching for the scarf and getting disappointed. That thought alone convinced him to go. He got ready, picked up the scarf, and started driving. The road to her village was peaceful, lined with green fields, small houses, and quiet lanes. As he drove, He wondered what he would say to her. Would she even remember him? After all, they had spoken only a few minutes at the wedding, but something told him she would. When he reached the village, he asked a few people for directions. Everyone knew Samira, not in the friendly way, but in the way people remember someone who stands out. He noticed that the villagers spoke about her with a mix of respect and distance, as if they didn't really know her, but had formed their own opinions anyway. Finally, he reached a small house at the edge of the village. It was simple but neat, with flowers planted along the pathway. Before he could knock, the door opened slightly. Samira stepped out, surprised to see someone at her doorstep. For a moment, she looked unsure. Then, her eyes fell on the scarf in his hand. "I think this belongs to you," Armand said with a gentle smile. Samira let out a breath she didn't even realize she was holding. "I thought I lost it," she said softly. "Thank you." She didn't take the scarf immediately, almost as if she was afraid of seeming rude. "I found it in my bag this morning," Armand said. "I must have picked it up by mistake." She finally reached out and took it gently, holding it close to her chest. "This is my mother's scarf," she said quietly. "I didn't want to lose it." Armand nodded, understanding the emotion behind her words. Before he could decide whether to leave, Samira stepped back and opened the door wider. "Would you like to come in?" she asked shyly. Armand hesitated only for a moment before accepting. He stepped inside her home, and the first thing he noticed was how peaceful it felt. Simple furniture, clean floors, soft colors, everything was arranged neatly, almost as if each item had a place and purpose. Samira offered him water and sat down across from him. She seemed more relaxed inside her home, as if the walls gave her a sense of comfort she didn't feel among crowds. "I didn't expect you to come all the way here just to return a scarf," she said. "It didn't feel right to leave without giving it back," Armand replied. "And I wanted to make sure you were okay. You seemed a little tired yesterday." Samira looked slightly surprised. "Most people don't notice things like that," Armand smiled lightly. "Sometimes you notice things when someone carries them quietly." There was a long pause after that, not uncomfortable, but meaningful. Samira seemed to be deciding whether to open up or keep her guard raised. After years of staying away from people, letting someone into her emotional space wasn't easy. "You know," she finally said, "I don't usually go to weddings or any big events. I went yesterday, only because my mother's friend insisted." "Although," Armand nodded. "Crowds aren't easy for you?" She gave a small, sad smile. "They never were. People stare. Sometimes they whisper. Sometimes they look scared. Sometimes they laugh quietly, thinking I can't hear. It's been like that since I was a child." Armand listened carefully, not interrupting. He could see how much strength it took for her to speak openly about her life. "I learned to stay away," she continued. "Peace is easier when you're alone. No expectations. No discomfort." "Doesn't it get lonely?" Armand asked softly. She looked down at her hands. "It does, but loneliness can feel safer than being hurt." Her words touched something deep inside Armand. He didn't know all she had faced, but he could sense the weight of years on her shoulders. Years of being judged by her height, misunderstood, treated differently. "When you walked into the hall yesterday," he said gently, "I thought you looked strong. But now I understand you're strong because you had to be." Samira looked up, her eyes softening slightly. She wasn't used to kind words. She wasn't used to someone trying to understand her instead of avoiding her. "Life teaches you to protect yourself," she whispered. Armand nodded. "But sometimes life also sends someone who shows you that you don't have to protect yourself all the time." There was silence again, this time filled with emotion. Samira looked away for a moment, taking a deep breath. "I haven't had anyone to talk to in a long time," she admitted. "Most of my days are quiet. I read, I cook, I do chores, and I live my own life. People keep their distance. I don't blame them, but it becomes heavy." Armand leaned forward slightly. "You don't have to carry everything alone." Her lips curved into a small, hesitant smile. Maybe. But I've lived like this for so long that it feels normal. Armand sensed there was more she wanted to share, and after a moment, she finally said the words she had held inside for years. I haven't been close to any man in 30 years, she said quietly. Not because I don't want companionship. I just never felt anyone would accept me. I got used to being alone. She said it without shame, without embarrassment, just simple truth. A truth shaped by life, not choice. Armand didn't react with shock or pity. He simply nodded with understanding. Thank you for trusting me with that. Samira's eyes softened again. She wasn't expecting such a calm response. She was used to people reacting with surprise or awkward questions. But Armand treated the moment with respect, as if her truth was something sacred. You know, he said, being alone doesn't mean something is wrong with you. Sometimes it means no one worthy came along. Samira let out a soft breath that sounded almost like relief. I don't know why I'm telling you all this, she said with a gentle laugh. I barely know you. Sometimes, Armand replied. You can talk more easily to someone who listens without judging. She looked at him for a long moment, as if weighing his words. Then, to his surprise, she smiled a real, warm smile he hadn't seen from her before. I'm glad you came today, she said quietly. So am I, Armand replied. After that, their conversation became lighter. She told him about her garden, her job in the nearby town, her hobbies. Armand shared stories from his life, his work, and why he had moved away from his hometown. The hours passed without either of them noticing. When Armand finally stood to leave, Samira walked him to the door. Will you visit again? She asked softly, almost nervously. Armand smiled. If you don't mind, I'd like to. She nodded, her eyes showing something new hope. As Armand walked back to his car, he realized he felt something he hadn't felt in a long time. A sense of connection. Not love, not romance, but the beginning of something meaningful. He didn't know what future waited ahead, but he knew one thing for certain. Samira's story wasn't one of weakness. It was a story of resilience. And for the first time in decades, someone had stepped into that quiet world she had built around herself, and she had let him in. After Armand's first visit, something changed in Samira's home. It wasn't anything big or dramatic. It was something small, something quiet. Like opening a window after keeping it closed for many years. The air felt different. The walls felt a little less lonely. And Samira, who usually spent her evenings in silence, found herself thinking about the conversations she had shared with Armand. He didn't talk too much. He didn't ask uncomfortable questions. He simply listened. And that alone made her feel valued in a way she hadn't felt for years. A few days passed, and Armand returned to her village. This time, he brought a small basket of fruits. When Samira opened the door and saw him standing there again, her eyes widened with surprise. But there was a warmth in them too, a quiet happiness that appeared before she could hide it. You came again, she said softly. If it's okay with you, Armand replied, smiling politely. It is, she said, stepping aside to let him in. Soon, visiting her became a regular part of his days. Sometimes he came after finishing his work in town. Sometimes he passed by just to say hello, and other times, he stayed for hours, helping her with small things around the house. At first, Samira felt awkward watching him fix a broken chair or clean the dust from a high shelf. She wasn't used to help. She had done everything alone for so long that accepting someone's support felt almost unfamiliar. You don't have to do all this, she said once, as he tightened a loose hinge on her kitchen door. I know, Armand replied. But I want to. Besides, you do enough on your own. Samira didn't argue again. She simply watched him with a soft expression, touched by the kindness. Their conversations grew deeper too. Armand learned about her childhood in the village, about how she grew taller than other children at a very young age, and how people reacted to her with curiosity, confusion, or even fear. She talked about how she used to stand at the back of classrooms, how she avoided school events, and how she slowly learned to hide herself from the world. It wasn't easy, she said once, her voice quiet. But I accepted it. I told myself that staying alone was better than being hurt. Armand listened carefully. He didn't interrupt or offer quick advice. He simply let her speak, and that alone made her feel safe. In return, Samira learned about Armand's struggles too, how he lived most of his adult life, working in another city, how loneliness followed him even in big crowds, and how returning to his hometown reminded him of everything he had missed. Maybe we're both lonely in different ways, Armand said one afternoon. Samira looked at him for a long moment, before nodding. Maybe we are. As the days turned into weeks, their connection began to grow naturally. There was no pressure, no expectation. Just a quiet comfort that came from being near each other. Sometimes, they sat outside in her small garden, watching birds hop on the branches. Other times, they cooked simple meals together. And sometimes, they simply sat in silence, yet even the silence felt peaceful. One evening, while they had tea in her yard, a few villagers walked past. They glanced at them curiously, whispering to one another. Samira noticed it instantly. She stiffened, her hands tightening slightly around her cup. Armand saw the change in her expression. "Are you okay?" he asked gently. She took a slow breath. "People talk," she said quietly. "They always have. I thought I got used to it. But when I'm with someone, I get scared. They will drive that person away too." Armand placed his cup down and looked at her with calm eyes. "Let them talk. Their words won't change how I see you." Samira hesitated. "You say that now. But, no," Armand said softly but firmly. "Words don't matter when your heart knows the truth." Her eyes softened. She looked down, touched by the sincerity in his voice, and for the first time, she felt a small spark of confidence growing inside her. That night, after Armand left, Samira sat alone in her room, thinking about everything that had changed. She had spent years hiding, protecting herself from the world. But now, someone had stepped into her quiet life, with patience, respect, and gentle kindness. She wasn't sure if she deserved it, but she felt grateful. A few days later, Armand visited again, this time with a small potted plant. "What's this?" she asked, surprised. "A gift," Armand said, handing it to her carefully. "You said you wanted more plants for your garden." Samira smiled, genuinely touched. "Thank you. It's beautiful." They planted the flower together, their hands brushing lightly as they worked. Samira's heart felt warm in a way she couldn't explain. As the sun set, they sat outside again. Samira seemed thoughtful, almost restless. "What's on your mind?" Armand asked. She took a deep breath. "Armand, I need to tell you something." He waited patiently, giving her time. "You know how I said I haven't been close to anyone for 30 years, she began softly. "It wasn't just because of fear. It was also because I didn't believe anyone could truly care for me." Her voice trembled slightly. "But lately, when you talk to me, when you visit, when you help me, I feel something I haven't felt in a very long time. It scares me, but it also makes me hopeful." Armand didn't rush to speak. He let her finish. "I don't know if I'm ready for anything," she whispered. "I don't know how to be with someone. I don't know how to let myself feel everything I've kept inside." There was silence, the kind that held meaning instead of emptiness. Armand took a slow breath and spoke gently. "Samira, you don't have to know everything. You don't have to hurry. You don't have to pretend. I'm here because I want to be. And we can take everything one step at a time." Samira's eyes filled with emotion, but she blinked it away. "You make it sound easy," she said softly. "It doesn't have to be hard," he replied with a gentle smile. Samira looked away, but a small smile touched her lips. She felt something she hadn't allowed herself to feel in decades: trust. Real trust. From that day on, their bond grew even stronger. Armand visited more often, and soon, the villagers became accustomed to seeing them together. Some whispered, some wondered, and some even judged. But Samira didn't let it affect her the way it used to. Armand's presence gave her courage she didn't know she had. One afternoon, While she was preparing tea, she looked out the window and saw Armand fixing the fence in her yard. He looked focused, wiping sweat from his forehead now and then. Something warmed inside her chest, a gentle, deep feeling she didn't fight this time. She stepped outside and walked toward him. He looked up, smiling. "Fence almost done," he said. Samira didn't speak immediately. Instead, she took a slow breath and reached for his hand. Armand paused, surprised but not confused. Her hand trembled slightly as her fingers touched his. "Armand," she whispered, "I care about you." It was the simplest sentence, yet it carried years of silence, years of loneliness, and years of fear slowly melting away. Armand squeezed her hand gently. "I care about you too." Samira looked down, her heart beating faster, but in a warm, hopeful way. She felt safe. She felt seen. She felt understood. For the first time since her youth, she allowed herself to feel something comforting, something tender. Their hands remained joined for a long moment as the evening breeze brushed past them. This was not love rushing in all at once. It was trust, friendship, comfort, and quiet affection growing naturally like a flower opening slowly. Petal by petal, after spending too long in the shade, Samira didn't know what would happen next. Armand didn't know either. But they both knew one thing. Something real had begun. Something that neither of them had expected, but both of them needed. And without realizing it, their story was gently leading them toward a future that would change both of their lives. Days turned into weeks, and the bond between Armand and Samira continued to grow in gentle, steady ways. There were no dramatic moments, no sudden changes, only the calm and honest connection that formed naturally between two people who understood what loneliness felt like. Armand had extended his stay in the town far longer than he originally planned. His relatives joked about it, asking why he was still around, but he always found a simple excuse. He told them he needed a break from the busy city, or that the peaceful environment helped him think. All of that was partly true, but the real reason was something he didn't want to explain. He enjoyed spending time with Samira. One afternoon, Armand accompanied Samira to the weekly market. It was a small but lively place where villagers bought vegetables, fruits, and things for their homes. Samira usually avoided crowded areas, but with Armand beside her, she felt more comfortable. People looked at them as they walked. Some smiled politely, others whispered among themselves. But Samira didn't shrink back like she used to. She stayed close to Armand, feeling a sense of security from his steady presence. Armand also noticed the stares but didn't let them affect him. Whenever someone looked too curiously, he simply continued talking to Samira so she wouldn't feel uncomfortable. They bought vegetables, some spices, and a few household items. At one stall, an older woman selling handmade baskets recognized Samira. "It's been years since I saw you here," the old woman said kindly. "It makes me happy to see you outside again." Samira gave a shy smile, and Armand could see she felt genuinely touched. The old woman then looked at Armand. "And who is this gentleman?" Samira looked uncertain for a moment, but Armand gave a simple, calm answer. "A friend." The old woman nodded with a warm smile, as if she understood something deeper than the words themselves. As they walked back home, the wind felt gentle, and the road quiet. Samira carried one bag, and Armand carried the rest. "You handled that well," Armand said softly. Samira glanced at him. "I wasn't scared this time." "That's good," he replied. "You should go out more. People will understand in time." Samira smiled faintly. "Only because you were with me." Armand didn't comment, but the warmth in his eyes said enough. That evening, after they put away the groceries, they sat outside in the garden. The potted plant Armand had gifted her weeks ago was blooming now, its small white flowers shining softly in the fading light. "You've taken good care of it," Armand said. Samira nodded. "I take care of things that matter to me." Armand turned to look at her, sensing an unspoken message in her words. Their conversations became gentler and deeper that night, filled with quiet emotions that didn't need to be said out loud. And somewhere between the silence and the soft breeze, Armand realized something. He didn't want this connection to end. He didn't want to say goodbye and return to his old life. The next morning, Armin woke up early, feeling a mixture of nervousness and certainty. He had made a decision. Something meaningful, something honest. He went into town, bought a few small things, and spent hours preparing for something simple yet important. When he finally arrived at Samira's house later that afternoon, she opened the door with a soft smile, unaware of what the day would bring. "You came earlier than usual," she said. "I wanted to talk to you," Armand replied, his voice calm but serious. Samira looked slightly worried. "Is everything okay?" He nodded. "Yes. But I need to tell you something." They walked to the garden and sat under the shade of a tree. Samira waited quietly, her hands resting on her lap, her eyes full of gentle curiosity. Armand took a deep breath. "Samira, these weeks with you have been meaningful to me. More meaningful than I expected. I've found peace here, understanding, and most importantly, I've found you." Samira's breath caught softly, but she stayed silent. "I want to be honest," Armand continued. "I don't want this to be temporary. I don't want to just visit for a few days and leave. I want a life where you and I can continue sharing moments, supporting each other, caring for each other." Samira blinked slowly, unsure how to respond. "I know your life was quiet for many years," he said gently, "and I know you avoided relationships because you didn't want to be judged or hurt. But I want you to know, I'm here because I truly respect you. I care about you deeply." He paused, looking into her eyes. "And if you allow it, I would like to spend my life with you." Samira's eyes widened, and she let out a small, shaky breath. Her hands trembled slightly, not from fear but from the overwhelming emotion rising inside her. "You mean," she whispered, unable to finish the sentence. Armin nodded softly. "Yes. I'm asking if you would like to marry me." There were no loud declarations, no dramatic gestures. Just a simple, honest question. For a moment, Samira didn't speak. Her heart raced. Her thoughts tangled. She had lived alone for so long that the idea of sharing her life with someone felt both beautiful and frightening. "Armin," she said quietly, "I don't know how to be a wife. I don't know how to live with someone. I've spent years by myself. I don't want to disappoint you." Armin gently took her hand. "Samira, you don't have to know everything. We will learn together, step by step, at your pace. I'm not asking you to change who you are. I'm only asking if you will let me walk beside you." Tears filled her eyes, not of sadness, but of relief. For years she believed no one would ever accept her as she was. And now someone was offering her a life of kindness, respect, and companionship. After a long pause, she whispered, "Yes, Armin, I want this too." Her voice trembled, but the decision came from her heart. Armin smiled, a smile filled with calm joy. He didn't rush to hug her or make the moment overwhelming. He simply squeezed her hand gently. A few weeks later, they arranged a small wedding. No big stage, no large crowds, no loud music, just a simple ceremony with close relatives and a few neighbors. Samira wore a dress that fit her comfortably, and she looked peaceful rather than nervous. When Armand saw her walking toward him, he felt something warm spread through his chest. Gratitude, hope, and affection all mixed together. Samira paused for a moment before reaching him. She looked into his eyes, her heart steady and sure. "I haven't been with any man in 30 years, she said softly, repeating the truth she had once shared with fear and vulnerability. "But today, I feel ready to walk forward." Armand nodded gently. "And I'm here with you." As the small group watched, Samira leaned down slightly and placed a gentle kiss on his forehead, a gesture full of warmth, acceptance, and love. The guests smiled, touched by the sincerity of the moment. The ceremony ended with blessings and soft laughter. There were no grand celebrations, just genuine happiness. When they returned home after the wedding, Samira stood in the garden where everything had begun: the conversations, the trust, the friendship. Armand joined her, and they looked at the blooming plant he had gifted her months ago. "It grew beautifully," Armand said. Samira smiled. Just like us. And as the evening sun painted the sky with soft colors, they stood together, two people who had once carried loneliness in their hearts, now beginning a new chapter, filled with companionship, understanding, and gentle love. Their story wasn't about perfection. It was about healing, about courage, about opening doors that had been closed for years, and together, they stepped into their future, hand in hand, ready for the life they would build with patience, kindness, and hope.